To prime or not to prime? That's today's question on Airbrushing with Aaron. I'm Aaron. I don't always prime, but when I do, it's to show imperfections in the model. Gaps that haven't been filled properly, seams I might have missed, mismatches in the plastic, that kind of thing. A uniform gray primer will show all of those to good effect and allow you to fix them before you apply your finished paints. Most model paint manufacturers have a primer in their line. A lot of times I like this Tamiya spray can primer. It's easy to use. I've decanted it before. I've also sprayed it straight out of the can. Works very well, gives you a nice level, velvety smooth surface. But a lot of models like this barn, for example, just have too many nooks and crannies that you have no control over with the spray can. For the newer acrylics like AK Interactive, Vallejo, Ammo of Mink and Manez, the water-based acrylics, I really like this Vallejo acrylic polyurethane surface primer. It's very sturdy, gives a very good surface that acrylic paint adheres to particularly well. Vallejo's done a nice job recently of these pre-colored sort of base coat primers, so you're combining the traditional base coat and primer in one layer. Today's priming is going to be the tale of two tanks. We're going to start with this HO scale propane tank. It's a piece of PVC with some clear hemispheres on the end, nice mix of materials. I'm going to use the Acrylicos Viejo primer on the tank. It's airbrush ready right out of the bottle, but I usually add a drop or two of their thinner just to make it run a little smoother. It's very helpful if this has been sitting around a little while. All right, so I'm going to start by just the same simple technique we did when we're for basic painting, and that is slow, even passes. Light coats again, always work best. Just keep working it on until you get a good coat of paint. It's going to take a while to even out the differentiation between the PVC pipe and the clear ends here. It feels like I'm getting a little tip drying, which is not uncommon with acrylics. So I'm just going to take a damp Q-tip or cotton swab and just clean off any paint on the tip. I'm pulling the needle back. You don't want to stick the cotton swab directly on the needle because you risk damaging it. That sounds a little better. You just want to keep building this up layer by layer until you've got a good solid coat of the gray primer and the whole thing looks like a uniform object. Now the propane tank is primed, and you can already see that the primer is showing a few problems with the construction. You can see that the seams between the cylinder and the ends is pretty apparent. There's a couple of minor chips out of here that you want to fill, those kind of things. That's what the primer has done here, is show things we need to deal with before we move on to actually painting this tank. Speaking of tanks, let's move on to the Whippet, a World War I British tank, which we're also going to prime with Acrylicos Viejo, in this case one of their green primers. This tank's a lot more complex than the previous one. It's going to take a slightly different approach. It's going to be more like some of the other things we've painted, where I'm going to start with the overhangs and undercuts and recesses and so forth and get those painted first. It's important to keep turning the model around and assessing your work so you can find any spaces that you might have missed, overhangs, little undercuts that weren't obvious from the angle you were holding it at previously. These little parts of the running gear back under here. Any place that's just going to be obvious that it's not painted once the model is done, you want to try and get now, particularly with the primer. Another advantage to using this dark green primer is it's going to be pretty well hidden underneath the green paint to come. One of the things that's hard about a model like this that has to be all primed is that it's difficult to hold it. There's no good handle. I'm holding it underneath, so any fingerprints that I put into the paint are going to be hidden up under the vehicle. We'll do another video later about how to hold objects and models for paint. So the Whippet's primed now, and it's a pretty good fitting model, but there are still a couple of areas I'm going to take care of before I do more painting. There's a gap here by the driver's hatch. Nothing too major, but it's nice to know about them now before I go ahead and put the lighter moss green on. That light green will show those problems like a dandelion amongst your roses. So that's why I prime. It's always going to be a personal choice as to whether or not to do it, but I think that ultimately it improves the fit and finish of your models. We're going to go on and finish both of these tanks in later episodes, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching. I'm Aaron Skinner. Far goes. I'm going to do one of those Sesame Street things. I don't always prime, but when I do. Can I try that?